Welcome to MamaFuel, the podcast that fuels every mama's heart, soul, mind, and body, and hopefully sparks a few dreams along the way. I'm Ann Ferguson, Chief Nurturer and Mama Mentor at the Centered Mama Project, and your host for this podcast. I'll be sharing real, raw, and often funny conversations with beautiful mamas from around the world to remind you that you're not alone and that you're doing amazingly on this wild journey of shepherding small humans as they make their way on our beautiful planet. Let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of MamaFuel, the podcast. I am, as ever, delighted to be spending this time with you and to bring you an extraordinary conversation this week. My guest is Celia Ward-Wallace. She is an activist, a creator, an entrepreneur, a mama, and a soul sister of mine whose path has been crossing mine for the last few years. And you are witness to our first actual conversation ever. So I'm super excited that we get to actually encapsulate this and share it with the world, because this will be the first of what I know will be many conversations. And Celia, I am so delighted to have you here. And everyone who is listening, I'm so delighted you're here too, because we want to hear what you have to say. So welcome, Celia.
Thank you for having me. We're making history.
I know, the first of many conversations. So let's just build a context for our mama who's listening to us. Tell us what your life looks like right now.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, at this exact moment, I'm sitting in my home office. I have an amazing two-story craftsman home in the middle of South Central Los Angeles. My husband and I have lived here for 2 decades, and he grew up in the neighborhood and I grew up about 5 minutes away. And we have this big historic home that's 100 years old that we have grown into ourselves. When we first found it, it was Martin Luther King Day, 2003. And we were cutting through the neighborhood looking to actually avoid the big Martin Luther King Day parade that happens. That's an epic historical annual parade here. And so we were cutting through the neighborhood trying to sort of get out of the traffic when we saw this big, gigantic, bright green and yellow home that just was calling to us. And I'm super spiritual, and I just felt like this home had a soul. We were supposed to stop. We were supposed to go into it because I had a for sale sign. And at that time, we were really deep into real estate. And we got in the house immediately because we were agents. And, you know, my husband, literally the minute we walked in and I looked up, and the first thing I saw on the ceiling was this, craftsman light fixture. And he said, don't get emotional. Don't get attached to the house. And within 3 weeks, we owned the house. He negotiated this amazing deal and we got this home, and we've been growing into it ever since. So now we have, fast forward, 2 daughters together, Ava and Layla, and I'm a bonus mom. My husband has been married before and had 3 kids of his own. So I have actually adult bonus children, stepchildren that I've been co-parenting since I was 21 years old when I started dating my husband. And and I have a beautiful blue-nosed pit bull who's 2 years old named Bella, who I'm crazy about, who's basically like my hangout partner all day. Whenever I take my kids to school in the morning, I come home. Well, I take them to school in the morning, then I try to get some exercise in. So I'll take Bella, we'll walk for an hour, and we'll listen to podcasts like yours. And then I'll come home and I'll try and really hammer out that window of work that's usually for me something like 10 to 2 or 10 to 3, because then I have to transition back into mama mode and do the pickup. And then the whole thing begins because both of my girls are competitive soccer players. So we're 4 weeknights a week at the soccer fields. And then almost every single weekend we're at a tournament or games or whatever. And we're really blessed because we're part of a South Central LA AYSO community, and we've been there for almost 10 years. And so we have deep roots, and we have a huge web of friends and family through that community. So even though it's super rigorous and sort of a crazy schedule, we are so just blessed to have so much, goodness in our life with all these different people. So all that to say, that's where I am now. That's what I'm up to in these days. And then in that 5-hour or 4-hour window of time each day, is where I make all the magic happen. That's where I create and really step into my big mission on the planet to empower 1 million women. That's my goal.
Which is awesome. And we are going to come back to that a lot in our conversation, because that online business universe is the place where our paths keep crossing. And you have a couple of business partners, one of whom I know quite well, and another one of whom I've also, like you, been, in her sphere for a long time. And so if you're listening, Elena Lipson is one of Celia's business partners in the Sacred CEO company that they have. And Lindsay Pera is the third leg of this beautiful three-legged stool, and she has agreed to come onto the podcast as well. So we will have all three, the triumvirate, the trifecta, as they say, on the podcast soon. I hope. We need to organize that. So Lindsay, if you're listening, I've got you on my sights for soon.
Yeah. And then just before we transition from that, just to say that I think for the mamas or the mama CEOs or the aspiring entrepreneurs listening, and the really interesting thing about our partnership is we all three have our independent solo businesses that we started at the same time, and we actually all became friends and sort of mastermind buddies, and some of us coached with each other when we were first starting our businesses. And so we really supported each other in growing our independent businesses. And then over time, we had this deep friendship. And we started to create our own just really informal weekly mastermind group just to talk, just to support each other, to say, what's going on? Oh my God, I'm freaking out. And then we started to realize over time that we wanted to co-create together. So our primary offering that we created together is the Sacred CEO Women's Retreat, where we bring, world-changing women leaders together for a week and really nurture them, but also help them create their thought leadership for the next year or wherever they're going. But all of that is to say that, we have that foundation in place of our solo biz. Then we created the second one together, which is not something we recommend people jump into lightly or quickly, because it's hard enough to run your own business. But imagine 3 women. But all of this is great because what really brought us together is our shared sort of lifestyle and values, where we all 3 have 20 plus year marriages to, actually, it's really interesting. We call them our warrior husbands or our warrior men, because Elena's husband is a police officer, and Lindsay and my husbands are firefighters. And so we have this sacred masculine, really caregiving, strong, sensitive, loyal husbands. And then we all have children, and then we all have businesses. And so that was sort of the nexus that brought us together, was really that alignment and our commitment to our inner circle, to, really the core values of our life that mattered to us. And really, of course, wanting to create these big missions in the world and having impact, but not wanting to allow it to take away from that lifestyle and those priorities that really mattered the most to us. Yeah. So I'm glad you brought them up. I love them very much. And they're my sisters. They're my sisters. We're very committed to sisterhood. We believe that bringing women back into sisterhood, into community, into circling is really the secret sauce that's going to, create this next future that we're looking to build.
Totally. And that is, I've got sisterhood written in giant letters here in my notebook, because I want to talk about that. And anyone who's listening and has been listening for a while, if this is not your first time, you will have heard me talk about the MamaFuel Sisterhood, which is opening its doors this month, at time of recording in February 2019. And if you haven't heard before, then you can hear at the end of the podcast, I'll have a little bit of an explanation and let you know what it's all about and how you can join. But I'd love to take a step way back and go back to your early life, because you've lived in South Central LA forever, right? And you had a very specific kind of upbringing. Your parents were activists, and they raised you to be very aware of what was going on in the political landscape and socially around you. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I'm actually right now writing my second book, which is a memoir, a politically charged memoir. I'm very, spoiler alert to anybody listening, and I'm very progressive. I'm very political, and social justice is really the lens that I sort of always place over anything that I'm doing. And I'm really looking at it from a race, class, gender perspective, and sort of always looking at equity and equality and privilege and all of that. And it's very unusual it may be less unusual to people now because the last few years since we've had this president and we have had the women's marches, people are starting to wake up. I call them sort of the newly woke. And sometimes I say the newly woke white woman, right, is sort of waking up to these issues. However, for me, I'm 41 years old and I literally woke up. My first breath on this planet was to two fully woke parents who had, from 20 years old, had decided that they were committing their life to anti-racism work, to civil rights work, to women's rights work. And so my parents, my dad at very young age, at 18, started working with the Congress of Racial Equality in the 1960s in Harlem. As a Jewish man, as a field organizer, knocking on doors in Harlem, as one of the only non-Black organizers, bringing people out into the streets to go to rallies and to do sit-ins and do all this amazing work. And he has literally, from that moment on, he's in his 70s now, he's still working full-time. He still has a nonprofit organization here in Los Angeles, actually located in South Central Los Angeles, doing social justice work. And my mother, she came from a more privileged upbringing, more of a Southern sort of WASP upbringing, but she landed in Berkeley for college, and she was part of the feminist, the birthing of that feminist movement, deeply rooted in, the anti-war movement, but also the feminist movement. And she led consciousness raising circles, and she really became, and still is, a historian on feminism and patriarchy and the overlay of imperialism. And so she has her PhD, and they're both, published writers, and so these are my parents, right? And so when I grew up, both of my parents were part of a communist organization in the United States that was working towards basically civil rights and social justice issues. So it was a united coalition of multiracial organizers. And so I was literally every day after school going to their community meetings where all of the people brought their kids. And so it was like sort of this utopian experience of like multiple races of children running around being best friends while their parents are meeting, trying to figure out, which factory they're going to demonstrate against their, labor union policies or their environmental policies, or, they're very much involved in the unions. And my parents were both auto factory workers. Even though they were both highly educated and very privileged, they decided that they needed to go work in the factories on the actual assembly line so that they would be of the people that they were trying to organize into the labor unions. And so their story, my parents' stories are so rich, and there's so many amazing things I can tell you about them. But all of that is to say that I grew up from the beginning seeing the world very differently and having all of the conversations that now a lot of people are just starting to get, figuring how to even have, awkward, difficult, challenging conversations. I was having those from day one. And in general, my community was people of color, way more so than white people. And so while we were white and we were very aware that we were white and all of the privileges that it carried, we spent most of our time in a primarily Latino and Black community. And I actually grew up in mid-city LA, which is about 5 to 10 minutes away from South Central. And then when I was in 2003 is when my husband and I bought the home, and we've been living here ever since. So about 20 years here in South Central. And now we're about to open up a cafe about 5 blocks away from our house, a little coffee shop that's going to be South LA Cafe. So we're putting even more investment into our community and giving back here in our own backyard.
Which is amazing. And you're going to be providing a space for everyone who lives in and around the area where you live, and probably more broadly, a space that is safe and open, and that I'm sure will be infused with your way of, your vision of the world and your capacity to have those uncomfortable conversations and to encourage people to get uncomfortable so they can connect and to be vulnerable and to express their feelings. And I think it feels already like it's going to be a really rich nucleus for the community, a really beautiful addition, a meeting place, a hub for people's ideas and passions and hearts to converge, really. It feels
we're really excited about it as a cultural hub. And obviously it's a coffee shop, and we're going to be providing, affordable sort of grab and go healthy options for food and that kind of stuff. But there's really nothing like that that's, sort of for the community, by the community here in our neighborhood. We live in what is called a food desert, which is basically when you live in an underserved, primarily minority, lower income community, you don't get the grocery stores to come into the community. You don't get the
Whole Foods and all
well, even Trader Joe's, or even Ralph's. We don't even have that here. And so the community has been rising up and advocating for this for, really the last 100 years. And this is a community that, was specifically set up as a result of segregation, where they were saying in terms of the zoning laws and the sort of statutes that were put in place about where Black people could and could not live in Los Angeles, they put them here in this area. And then all of the white people who were living here, it's the white flight, they ran out of the neighborhood. But what we're experiencing now is as the cost of living in Los Angeles is so high, all of the, more so-called desirable neighborhoods or West Side neighborhoods are becoming so expensive to live there that even those who have a lot of money and can afford $1 million house can't afford to live in the areas they want to live in. Mm-hmm. And so they keep creeping closer and closer and closer to us. And, it's this gentrification issue that's happening all over the world, really. Yeah. But what happens with that is as companies start to see that the population is changing and the wealth distribution is changing and people are coming in that have, that are more middle class or upper class, all of a sudden now people start speculating that this is a nice neighborhood where they should start investing their money in and start developing. And so what we're experiencing is we're literally within a mile, stretch literally along Martin Luther King Boulevard, where if on one end and on the other end, on the intersections and the streets that go right there, they're starting to build massive developments, like just flooding it with money and bringing in all kinds of things that are really not for they're not designing it for the actual people who live here. They're designing it for the people they know that are going to come. And so for us, it's been extremely painful to see that the investment hasn't been made actually in the people over all these years that have desperately needed it. And so the only thing that we can figure out to do about it is to put a stake in the ground and actually try to own something and create something that can't be taken away from us. And that is actually with the community in mind, that is an actual local community, small business, family-owned business, not a corporate, Starbucks or something like that. So we had this dream to do this, and it's a big dream. It's something that I'm sort of known for, and so is my husband, of like picking these sort of pie in the sky, big, hairy, scary goals and dreams, and doing things that most people feel like they could never do. And us just saying like sort of, fuck it, let's go for it.
Yeah.
And so he and I are sort of like going for it. And the whole time going like, are we really doing this? Like, holy shit, are we really
what we're doing? Because I don't know what we're doing. Who knows what we're doing?
Exactly. The whole time I'm like, okay, one of us has to have faith. Okay, one of us has to like believe that we can make this happen. And so, we're about halfway through the journey and it's like, oh my God, we're really doing this, and now we're at the point where we're like, and it costs a lot of money. Oh no, where are we going to get all the money?
Well, and you guys are crowdfunding, right? Which
we are crowdfunding
and more broadly, which is great.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it's an adventure, but yeah. So that's sort of the root of who I am. And the work that I've created around that is around women's empowerment and really the huge commitment I have to the strength of women on the planet that women have been marginalized and, really disconnected from their true potential and power and purpose for, so many thousands of years. And so my goal has really been to help women tap back into that, because I believe when they can become their fullest self and align to their purpose and really step into that power and use their voice and start stepping into leadership and, doing the work in the world that they're supposed to do, that then we're really going to start to see the world developing in the ways that we want it to. Because, no offense to the men, there's so many great men out there, but let's be honest, the guys that have been running the show have pretty much broken it, broken our world, and it's not looking too good. So my work, really focuses on that development of women stepping into their own form of leadership and figuring out how they can make that difference in the world.
You have an opportunity at the most grassroots level of all, which is in your own home, because you have two daughters who are, you said 10 and 13, right? About to turn 10 and 13. And so very close in age. Mine are 9.5 and 11.5. The halves matter a lot. Yes, they do. I was having a conversation with somebody today, and she said, I'm older than you. I said, I don't think you are. She said, no, I think I am. And she said, I'm not quite 50. And I was like, we're in the same half of the same decade at this point. Just like, that's the same age, It's not like when you're 10 and the half, the half is the most important thing almost. So you have two beautiful girls who some people you have said describe as biracial girls. You say they're Black, they're stunning, they're beautiful, they're Black girls. And you are raising these two beautiful girls in your home, in this amazing neighborhood, with your Black husband, and in the social context that has been evolving or devolving, depending on who you're looking at and what you're talking about. But has been fluid, right? Has been to the good. And my parenting coach is always saying there's always positive and negative in every situation. It often has me going, fucking positive and negative, But tell me about the decision. So you had these really, your parents have lived and walked their talk every second that you've known them. And that has informed your entire life, probably informed your choice in your partner, probably informs everything that you're doing. What have you decided to consciously do differently or to add into the mix as a mama to your beautiful girls and a bonus mom to the three adults who were probably not adults at the time when you met them? What have you and your husband decided to put into the mix with today's context?
Sure. So three things are coming up for me. If hopefully I can remember all three. We'll see how that goes. And mamas can relate to forgetting things. But
oh my God.
The first one is the first thing to just say is I have absolutely taken I believe that my family's legacy, that I'm living my family's legacy, and that I am an extension of these ancestors who have been freedom fighters. It makes me cry just saying it, and also colonizers. I also come from a deep colonizing history, and I have oppressor ancestors, and I, as a white person, have inherited, these racial biases and these biases in the world. And so while my husband is Black and my children, the reason I say that they're Black is because if you are ever around Black people enough for them to let you really know what it feels like to be in their life, they'll explain to you that the minute that they step outside their door, they feel under threat. They feel unsafe. And it is because of the color of their skin. And so if I walk out the door with my children, I don't have to feel that. I've never felt that, right? Mm-hmm. But I immediately feel afraid for them. Yeah. And if I'm with my husband and my daughters and we're out, I'm usually saying, let me drive. And, it's a horrific way to have to remind everybody of the fact that they are endangered. And yet it is also the role that I have to play as the mama bear to try to do my best to protect my husband and my children from being, in danger in the world. And so while they are technically multiracial and they're very aware of my ancestors and my both my Jewish and, sort of European roots, they they and we identify them as Black because they are Black women, and also there's so much to be proud of, right? And our world can make it like it's this bad thing, and I want them to be like proud Black women, and they're amazing. So all of that, I just wanted to put that piece out there, and so therefore, the social justice lens is a big part of the legacy of my family. And that is what I feel like I can pass along to them, is that, that piece of the awareness, that piece of the conversations, and just continually to be open about everything that I'm exploring, everything that I'm learning, everything that, they've gone to Families Belong Together marches, they've gone to the Women's March. Like, I tell them, get up out of bed. I know that you want to stay in the house and hang out and do nothing today, but you know what? People's lives are on the line, and we have so much privilege. Like, we need to get out there on the front lines and picket with them, And so I'm pushing them to have that as part of their legacy. But in terms of things that I'm doing differently, my parents were not spiritual at all. They had no spiritual foundation. They had an ethical foundation. They had the foundation that you get a lot of times from church or synagogue or religion, of these sort of tenets of what it means to be a good person, a good citizen. They had all of that through their commitment to being a good person in the world and their service work. So I inherited that from them, but I never inherited the understanding of being, created with everything I need within me, that I am an extension of the divine, that, there is magic and mystery at play in the universe, and that we don't understand everything. And yet there is something amazing going on, and that, there is something beyond what our eyes and ears can, see and hear. And, just because you don't know if it's real, if you can believe that it is, that is what faith is. And it wasn't until the real estate market crashed and the, huge recession hit that my husband and I, we had a real estate business at the time. We basically went into foreclosure on all of our properties. We ended up having to file for bankruptcy. My husband at the same time suffered a career-ending injury with the fire department that was a result of racial discrimination and harassment. And so it was like the shit hit the fan. Our lives fell apart. My husband was a shell of himself. I could not turn to him for support. I did not have anywhere to go. I did not know what to do. I thought I was going to lose my mind. And I found my way through trying to learn about spirituality, because I had all these girlfriends, especially growing up around Black women. Like, Black women are my best friends my whole life, and they are hugely spiritual women, And so it's like, I knew all about faith. I just didn't have any. I didn't know what it was and how you got it. And so for me, that was my journey over 6 months to a year to learn practices where finally over time I found my own spiritual practices and beliefs and understanding. And then sort of the light bulb went on and I had this faith. And so all of that is to say, and then, I worked with Lindsay Para, who's also my business partner, who, founded the Mystic Society. And I worked with her in spiritual training. And so I've really developed spirituality as a foundational aspect of my life, really the core of all of it. And that is something that I've really tried to give back to my children is, and my husband is a Christian. And, when we first got together, I was an atheist because my parents were atheists. That's the way I was raised. Yeah. And he was a Christian, and it made no sense that we were going to be together. He was Black, I was white. He was like a decade older than me. And he had been married and had kids and divorced. He had already been homeless. Like he had all this crazy stuff. And he was Christian, I was atheist. Like, we should not have been together. And yet it was a magnetic, like we had to be together, right? But all of that to say that I found my way to spirituality. And now with my girls, it's been really important. And he and I sometimes struggle with this because I think he would really have preferred that we raised our children Christian. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I really wanted them to find their way to their own belief system. Like, I wanted them to have the journey on their own path. I didn't want to indoctrinate them with a certain, way of being, but I did want them to know, that they I wanted them to know what I felt were the foundational spiritual beliefs of all religions. And then they could find their way to whatever that looks like for them. And so that's a very significant thing that I did differently. And then just the second thing I did differently is I think all of us, at least in this generation, mostly like our parents, their parenting style was like totally different. Like, I don't know what was going on in that generation, but it was very much of like, oh, your kids are fine. Like, oh, trust those kids. They don't need much, supervision. And so my parents, both by constantly being, working on some important world-changing, issue while working full-time, as workers, were very involved in the family. We had dinner together every night, and that's something we still do here in my household. But they also really treated me like an equal. Which was great. I actually do that with my kids too. However, at times I felt like, they trusted me so much and thought that I was going to be okay so much that I ended up getting myself into a lot of trouble where I felt, as an adult, you realize your parents did the best they could. And my parents love me so much. So this is not a criticism of them. But I just feel like there was a lot of sort of times where I thought sort of, what was I doing there? Like, why was that happening? Like, luckily nothing terrible happened, but there were a lot of circumstances where I wish that maybe there was a little bit more supervision. And so with my own girls, I've had to, with my own girl, I've had to try not to turn into like the crazy overprotective helicopter parent because I do, especially now that they're older, because I know now basically I'm trying to parent an adult, like I'm trying to get them to adulthood and actually be able to fly the coop, which is painful. But I've transitioned from like the first half of their lives, my goal has been like, keep them safe, keep their like little world perfect. Like, let no trauma happen because I work with women every day and, 9 out of 10 women I talk to has had some horrific trauma in their life, and I'm like, okay, this is clearly a prevalent part of women's experiences. Like, how can I actually get 2 daughters to get out of childhood and not have, had something terrible happen to them? And then now that they're in this sort of second set of, their time before they leave the house is, okay, how do I age appropriately, have the conversations I need to have and also give them the freedom and sort of independence to grow into learning those skills and make the mistakes and all that good stuff. So yeah, that's what I'm up to.
So you mentioned something that has tweaked a question for me. You mentioned that, trying not to be that overprotective helicoptering mom and wanting to give them a context where they're safe. It's like that thing, right? Just like alive through another day.
Yes.
And when you do, like I certainly came face to face and like nose to nose in a really big way, belly to belly with my anxiety, which I didn't really realize that I had. Looking back on childhood, I'm like, oh my God, of course. Like, oh, sweetheart, like how did nobody know that you were dying of anxiety inside? So becoming a mom just magnified that so much. And one of the things that happened in my life was that I really, really lost myself in my mothering. And that's why I created this podcast so that anybody who's listening understands that like nobody's doing it alone. You're not the only one who is feeling these things. You're not the only one who's having these experiences. Not everybody is this like, mountain scaling, universe achieving, like, and even if they are, we all are human mothers wanting to keep our offspring alive, safe, happy, and make sure that they get relatively unscarred, as you say, into the next season of their life, which is the teenage years and, bigger kids, bigger problems, they say here. So, through that to actually being independent adults, I would love to know, because this is a conversation that often comes up. And these are the moms that I work with, the moms that have completely lost themselves. And when you say to them, what do you love to do for fun? They just look at you and they're like, I don't even know how to spell that. Like they often burst into tears when I ask a question around that. They just look at me completely blank and they have nothing. So did you lose yourself at any point in motherhood, or were you able to kind of keep all of these things? Because it sounds like you guys have done a lot and you're very entrepreneurial and have had all kinds of different ventures, and you had these 3 like growing up kids as well that you were co-parenting with your husband. And I mean,
yeah.
whew.
Yeah, it is a lot. And first of all, I just want to say, I mean, I hope for those listening or watching that you can feel the authenticity in what I'm saying, that I get so mad at the way people on social media or in coaching position themselves in such a flawless, perfect way. And at the same time, I get really mad when women feel like they have to dim their light or play small or not claim their gifts or claim their accomplishments. And for myself, I am, with Lindsay and Elena and our, Sacred CO company, part of the reason we came together is because we realized all 3 of us talk to women about all of it, but we sort of tend to position ourselves in one space that feels really comfortable for us. So Elena's is the inner work around self-care and self-love and sort of, nurturing and developing your inner world. And Lindsay's is about the higher power. And so hers is all about that connection to spirit and, meaning and magic and all that stuff. And mine is about outer. And so mine is about, really allowing yourself to be like unhinged, right? Fully big and powerful, and also fully open to failing and, doing it in a public way. And so, and being all of yourself, like really just claiming all of yourself. And so all of that is to say that part of why sometimes when I speak or where you may be hearing my story, it's like, holy crap, this lady is like doing all this stuff. It's a lot because I am a very outer person. I am a creator. I'm a sort of a prolific creator. The way that spirit or God works through me is through ideas. And it's literally like a drop in. And so like when I say this in one of my videos, but like when I got the download that about a decade ago, when I turned into becoming an entrepreneur for working with women, I got this download that I was on the planet to empower 1 million women. Right. And it was like, oh shit, that's a really big, like, that's not like, oh, just I'm going to help little women in my community. It was like, no, I'm going to empower 1 million women. And I've gone to work on that mission, but I didn't quite know exactly how. And then about 2 years ago, I got this super clear download again. Then it was like, you're supposed to create this community, women empowering women. You have a heart for service and like giving back, and you want to bring in women from all over the world, and all that. And so create something that's really accessible and easy. And so it took me 2 years to finally get the guts to go and launch this women's community that I just did, in the last few months ago. But all of that is to say that being sort of bold and big is part of how I have grown into my full self. Like I've sort of had to push myself out there to catch up to it, to sort of say, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to tell everybody about it. Joe and I are going to create this cafe, South LA cafe, and we're going to tell everybody about it and say, we need money. And we're going to go out there and talk to you about it and do all this stuff where it's like, oh my God, like what are we doing? But it's like, because I claimed it and I claimed it publicly and I sort of went ahead, that was partially like the fake it till you make it, like, putting myself out there. And then the real me is over here scared to death and like, okay, what if I fail? Am I good enough? Like all the stuff we know, like the imposter syndrome, like, who am I to say this? Like, makes me think I could do any of this stuff, right? And then I go, well, you'd already claimed it. Like, you got to go try and be it, like get up there, girl. And so that's sort of the way I've always done my life, is sort of like, pick that next really big thing that's out there that feels edgy and feels like really vulnerable, and let people know I'm doing it, and then find my way to getting as close to it as possible. But in the context of have I ever lost myself, I actually feel like my children helped me to find myself. I really like the crisis with the market crash and finding spirituality and having children and finding my way to be an entrepreneur and a writer and an activist and coaching women. That all happened within the same 2 or 3 year zone. So I had this massive transformation in who I was. I was much more uptight. I was much more anxious because I didn't have spirituality. I had a lot of worries, right? I felt like I had to control everything because I was that type A sort of perfectionist, overproductive, like I can kill it kind of person in anything I do. But I didn't really have that inner peace part. And the spirituality brought that. But then with the children, it brought I really don't matter that much. Like the centering on me that my life was having up until that point of the worry about myself and like, who was I in the world and what was I going to accomplish and was I good enough and what issues did I have with my parents, and I have to think all the time about that kind of stuff. But as soon as I had kids, it was like, oh, I can be this other person and I can step in sort of similarly. I can step in. It's interesting. I'm just having a light bulb moment and it's making me tear up, but like, it's like I could create a clean slate with them, and decide who do I want to be now and, set that goal out far. And they don't know that goal I set is actually faking it, but I better hustle my little tail off to become that woman that I said I was going to be for them. And so I actually feel like I really found myself through them. And then in my marriage and in my relationship with my children, I have to keep fighting every day for myself. And so that has been part of, I wouldn't say I've ever lost myself, but I would say there is a lot of tension and conflict at times because I have to keep fighting for myself. I have to keep reminding myself that my everything about me matters and that because I'm doing everything every mom is doing. I am doing all the invisible labor. And I have this amazing husband who's a great partner, but it's not equal. Mm-hmm. And I'm busting my butt every day and I feel undervalued and I feel unrecognized. And then I feel like, and then I'm supposed to have this business and this world-changing mission and I'm supposed to get out there and change everybody's lives. And like, I'm barely making it through my life, And so there's a lot of me having to sort of push with them of like, renegotiating what this is going to look like. Or like, I told my husband last night, I said, while you were out, I spent 2 hours down here in the kitchen, scrubbing the kitchen. And I use bleach on these countertops. And I don't like bleach, but I know you like bleach. And you came home and I had dinner on the table when you came home. And it was a Sunday where I had all this time and I was enjoying it, but I was also doing it as a gift for him. Mm-hmm. And when he came home, he gave me a kiss and he sat down, he ate that dinner. He came in and talked to me in the kitchen and he was getting ready to go upstairs. And I said to him, I know you appreciate it, but please remember that my love language is words of affirmation. And if you don't tell me like for a few minutes about how grateful you are about the fact that I used bleach on these countertops and, got down and scrubbed this floor because I am not a traditional woman, then, I'm feeling resentful and I'm feeling unrecognized, right? So this is part of my sort of struggle is the constant day-to-day battle against sort of what I would call patriarchy, but like the traditional roles that we feel as mothers and wives that we're supposed to play. So
that's so interesting.
That's where I'm at.
We just had, I don't know if you've seen this. It's a French cartoonist who created an illustrated explanation of emotional load. And have you seen this? It's a very, I'll find it. I'm just going to make a note to link to it. I'm literally noting as we're hang on everybody, link to emotional load because I'll forget because mama brain. And she describes how even in a relationship where the man and the woman have relatively equally distributed physical tasks, responsibilities, chores that, they split the bed and bath routine, they split the picking up the kids and dropping them off, they split the laundry, they split the cleaning, they split whatever. What doesn't usually get split is the constant thinking of who needs to have their vaccines, who has to go to the doctor, who's got this appointment, this one's having a play date, like what do they need? They're going to, they have sports, they're doing this thing, okay, they got a tournament, let's put it on the family calendar.
Family manager. It's being the family manager,
like
holding it all together.
The chief purchasing officer, operations manager, like supply chain person tends still to be the woman. And so I had sent this to my husband and I said this, like, and one of the things that she says and she illustrates is, a man going to, I don't know what he does. He goes to sit down and watch TV, and the woman goes to sit down and watch TV. She picks up a sock that's on the floor, then she puts it in the hamper, notices that the hamper is kind of full, so she takes it to the laundry room. The laundry room, there's stuff in the washing machine that had to go in the dryer, so she puts it in the dryer, and she puts another load on, and then on the way up, there's another thing, and then she takes it, like, and the circuitous route that happens on a physical plane was kind of the illustration of what is at the same time what is going on in the mind of like, oh yeah, God, I picked up this sock. It's the soccer sock, and my kid's got a tournament on Saturday, and I can't like that. It's going to be nightmarish if this soccer sock isn't washed. Where is its pair? And got to go find the pair. And so I sent this to my husband, and I said, this is. I was very, very tired before Christmas, and I didn't realize I was desperately, like dangerously anemic for a long time, like probably for about a year. And it was really messing with my mental health. And I said to him, this is why I'm so tired. Yes, there's the anemia piece, but also this. Because in my case, he travels 70% of the time. And the rest of the time he works from home, but it's like the door's closed and he's telecommuting, right? So he needs to be in the office for all of his colleagues who are constantly Skype calling him. And I said, this is why I'm so tired all the time. And his response was really, really interesting to me. And we're not done this conversation, so I maybe shouldn't be sharing it, but I am anyway. His response to me was, he sat with it for a few days. And then we had a date night, which I've started instituting because we have not been very great. We don't have a lot of community around us locally, which is part of why I created the Centered Mama Project in the first place. It initially started out its life as a project for international women living in Geneva because we have nobody around us other than each other. And all of us, if we want to count on somebody else, well, she also doesn't have a partner around and she also has her kids and so it works, but it's a bit of a, it's a bit of a sort of patchwork thing. And he came back to me and he said on date night, as we were just about to hear this really awesome Kenyan guy named J.S. Ondara. If you haven't heard him, I will send you his information. Listen, you guys, he was at the Grammys last night.
Put it on your list. Put it on my list.
J.S. Ondara. So he did a show here in Geneva. So he's literally about to go on, and we're sitting in the audience, and I'm like, oh my God, we're in a live show. And like, I haven't been to a live show in a long time. I'm so excited with my husband. It's awesome.
And you're not thinking about the kids.
I'm not thinking about the kids for a second. And he says, that thing that you sent me, I think it's actually really unfair. And I think it's not true because the way that we do things at home and the way that we're organized is the way you want it. So if we're going to do things
that way,
if you want to do things the way that you want them done, then it only stands to reason that you're the one who's carrying the emotional load because we're doing things your way. Like, I'll take it over, but it's not going to be the way you want it. It's going to be the way I want to do it. I'm quite happy to live the way that you want to do it. But if you're going to be the home manager, if you want the things to go the way you want, well, then that's kind of part of the deal. And it really set me back on my heels because I thought, yeah, we need to have this conversation. This conversation needs to get a lot more uncomfortable than I'm prepared for it to get on our first date night. On our first date night and are way too long as we're about to like listen to this awesome guitarist and singer. But it was an interesting perspective for me because then it got me thinking, well, how much of that is because that's how I feel it should be? How much of that is the patriarchal messages, socializing that we have been taught? My mother ran our house. My father worked and was present in body, but not really in spirit. I had a very close relationship with him when I was older, but he was there, but not there. Like he was pretty absent. And I just, I think I'm a pretty progressive person. Like I talk to, and I'll always say, like, I'll talk to anybody. I'll talk to the janitor, I'll talk to the CEO, I'll talk to the security person at the airport, I'll talk to the person, I greet the people cleaning the toilets. Like I make a point of like, I have a human in front of me and I'm talking to a human in front of me, right? And yet, when I'm starting to have conversations or educating myself, you know, about the kinds of issues that you're talking about racism. I mean, I live in Switzerland. This is a very, very, very white place with very deep-rooted traditional ways of thinking and views on the world. There's a huge international community here, which is amazing. And also, it's hard to know people locally, even speaking French, which I do fluently. Even, you know, it's coming from Canada, where it's really a mosaic, where people keep their own culture and then contribute part of that to the broader culture. And, you know, there are racial tensions for sure, but it's nothing, I was gonna say it's nothing like it is in the US, but I just read something that tells me that's not right. It is perhaps not as endemic or as obvious, I think, as it is in the US or in the UK, where I've also lived. And so having these conversations, trying to have these conversations where I'm trying to educate my kids, or reading, you know, following Black women on Instagram so that I can see what they're reading and I can see what they're talking about, and try to start to understand my white, blonde, attractive woman, you know, privilege that on some level I don't even realize, but layers in with, you know, here I think I'm this free spirit and I broke all my parents' rules, and I, you know, about boys and about sex and about all kinds of other things, and being very open and age appropriate with my kids, but really open, like really open with them. Suddenly realizing just how much I'm still in those boxes, right? Like just how small that space still is, where here I am, I think I'm this like, you know, rebellious, super open, but really? And so I would like to know, selfishly, but also for anyone who's listening, where do you start? Like, where do you, what can you read? How do you start? You know, I look around the circle of people that I have in my life, and I have people from different ethnicities, different cultures, different countries, but even still, we're all pretty same. Like there hasn't been that activist piece at all in my WASPy father's upbringing, in my mother's very poor, my grandparents were very poor in France, but like also very uneducated. It just hasn't, like, it was all about education and higher learning and opera and culture and guitar playing and refinement. And dude, like, that is not the place where, you know, you're going to start to get woke, really. So how do I, and anyone who's listening, look at my kids and I mean, they're in international schools. They have kids from all over the world, but even still, there aren't that many. My mom first came to Geneva and she was like, wow, this is like, you go into Geneva and it's like the United Nations. And I was like, well, it actually is the United Nations. But, you know, even with that, what conversations do you have with your kids? How do you say to these beautiful, white, tall, live girls,
yeah,
you have a lot of privilege, and that comes with responsibility. Like,
well, I appreciate you bringing it up, first of all, and I think that's the first step. And obviously, I'm a white woman. We're two white women talking about this, and I think that I can only share from my own firsthand lived experience, and also what I've learned from people of color teaching me, because I certainly don't have all the answers, and I still am learn. It's a lifelong learning journey for me, and really for those who are interested, which should be everybody, part of that is the understanding that it is a lifelong journey for you as well. And that's part of why people check out, because they don't want to commit to a lifelong journey. They don't want to have to learn about things that make them uncomfortable and have conversations that make them uncomfortable and then say, well, you know, this is really painful and this is really, you know, uncomfortable for me, and to hear about other people's situations. And, you know, and I've done this. I read 4 books, or I went to that hear that woman speak, or, you know, I had a talk with my kid. I mean, you know, and this gets into people believing that they are good people and that they're not racist and that they're colorblind, right? And that they don't really see the world. Most white people would say, hey, I'm a good person and I have friends of all people, I'm good with everybody and I'm colorblind and I would never treat anybody badly. I would never do any of this stuff, right? And part of the problem with that approach is, there's multiple aspects in it, but one of the things is, first of all, the concept of colorblind means that we're not seeing people's differences and different cultures and different experiences. And the reality is that, like I said about my kids, we can't be colorblind because literally the second they walk out the house, they're under attack. So there's no way for them to, wouldn't it be nice for them to say, oh, I don't see color? Well, they can't not see color because people are seeing their color every day. And so that is one thing that we have to understand is we actually have to really see the color and we have to see the fact that these people's stories are real. And then we have to also sort of own the fact that whether we like it or not, we are actively complicit in perpetuating these systems of white supremacy because it's systemic. It's like it's in our DNA. We are born into the society that it literally was woven into the framework of creation of America, was created on horrifically, racist and violent enslavement of people as the way that we created our foundation and built our wealth. And that as white people, we have inherited hundreds of years of generations of wealth built on those, horrific patterns. And then we put systems in place like, once enslavement was over, then we had things like, the 13th Amendment that basically, because we could no longer enslave people, we can now arrest them and put them in jail for anything. All of the laws were written like anything, just basically being Black at any time, someone could arrest you and put you in prison. And now we've created a free workforce to continue to uphold the labor that we needed to build our country. And then we created, Jim Crow laws and segregation laws where we created, that Black people were second-class citizens and not actually fully human, right? We dehumanized Black people to be other than us. And that's where the whiteness was created in the first place, so that we could create a separation between white indentured servants and slaves that were working with the Black slaves who they were wanting to uprise against the concept of slavery in the first place. And the reason that white was created was so that they could then make those white indentured slaves and poor people feel like they were part of the elite class and therefore look down upon the others so that they could then not rebel against the ruling class, right? And really, challenge these systems of oppression. And so all of this is to say that it has been woven and it is continually, with right now with our mass incarceration of predominantly all Black and brown people, the over-policing of Black and brown people, the police brutality towards Black and brown people, it is rampant. And so to continue to see it, and it's one thing if you're saying, I absolutely know nothing about it and I am, not aware of anything, then, I would say, you need to start yourself in a boot camp of like studying this stuff. You have to read Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow. You need to read Invisible Man, by Ralph Ellison. You need to read Angela Davis's Women, Race, and Class. There's a million books up here that I can tell you to read, but you need to start your education process because basically once you know and you don't do anything about it, you're part of perpetuating the system of oppression. And that our role as white people, if we are not actively fighting against white supremacy, then we are complicit in perpetuating white supremacy. And that's the concept that's very hard for people to understand because they'll say, well, I'm not doing anything and I'm a nice person and I love everybody. And it's like, yeah, but you are benefiting from these structures. And by you not reaching out to local organizations and figuring out who in your community. I promise you, even where you are, there are anti-racist organizations. There are there's probably a Black Lives Matter chapter. By not actually pursuing it, you're perpetuating it and you're complicit in it. And it's not about, racism is not about being a good or a bad person. It just is what it is. It is endemic in our society and it's in our DNA. And so I have been raised in a Black community my entire life. Does that mean that I don't have white privilege? I have a Black family, and yet I have to carry the pain of the fact that I live and walk in the world in ways that my daughters will never experience the life that I live. They will never experience being able to feel safe the way that I do. They have been born with fear, right? And so, and we cannot center the conversation and the movement around white people. This is not about us waking up. This is about us coming to the table to the people of color and the women, predominantly women organizers who are leading these movements and saying, I'm fine getting in the back of the line and I don't know shit. And yet I want to learn and I want to figure out how I can help and I want to get involved. And that could look so many different ways. That doesn't mean you have to go demonstrate. That doesn't mean you have to do something you don't know what you're doing, but you have to start and you have to be curious and you have to realize that this is an ongoing, lifelong evolution of growth and education. And in terms of your children, part of it is you journey it yourself, just like anything you would, and you teach them along the way as you go what you're learning. And you have the conversations with them as you experience something new and learn something new. You then take the bits and pieces that you feel are important for them to have the conversation and talk to them about it. But we cannot raise, one of the greatest gifts we can give to the world right now is to raise a whole new generation of white children that are breaking the cycle of white supremacy. And so if anybody is listening to this, I hope and pray that you feel me in this and that you figure out how to take those next steps. And if you don't know what to do, again, I am not the expert, but I am certainly happy to have these challenging conversations and be vulnerable with what I've experienced. And if you don't know what to do, please reach out to me. I mean that sincerely. I would love for anybody and everybody listening to this to reach out to me personally. And I'm sure you'll provide the way that they can connect with me.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that in the show notes for sure. I'd like to shift gears a bit because I'm conscious of time and that I've got a kid upstairs with the flu that I want to check on before she falls asleep, and you've got a full day ahead of you. But one of the things that you were also really passionate about is raising your daughters to be upstanders and not bystanders. And this is a thing for anyone who hasn't heard those terms before. In social psychology, we often talk about like I'm a social psychologist. I'm not. My husband and I talk about social psychology all the time. He's an avid student of it. So a bystander is someone who will see something happening and just assume that someone else is going to help. So something is going on and there's a person in distress. Maybe they're having a medical emergency. Maybe they're being beaten up by someone. Maybe there's an accident. Maybe just the things that can happen in life. Or a woman fell down the stairs and died with carrying a stroller in New York a few weeks ago. Things don't have to be dramatic, but it can be little things like you're just going to assume that someone else is going to help the old lady carry her groceries or whatever. That's a bystander. And you are really passionate about raising your girls to be upstanders, and so am I. And this is a place where we really connect because I will often say to my kids, and Glennon Doyle has been a real model for me, in reminding her kids, in all of the writing that she does, you guys, we keep waiting for the grownups to show up. We're the people we've been waiting for. We need to get up and do stuff. And I'll say to my kids, I will never congratulate you for coming home and telling me that something happened and someone else helps. If you have any way whatsoever of doing something for someone, whether it's just that they look sad or that they're getting picked on or that they seem hurt or that maybe they're a little bit afraid, anything is going on that feels inside of you that is wrong. If it is physically safe for you to do something, I want you to get in there and be the person who does something. Come home and tell me you did something for that person, not that you stood there and waited for somebody else to do it. So how do you factor that upstanding? You obviously have the whole activism piece, which is demonstrating to them, right? You're embodying being an upstander and not a bystander in your neighborhood by what you're doing with the South LA Cafe, in the work that you're doing with women supporting women, in every breath you take. But do you have those conversations with the girls? How do you?
Sure. I mean, I think you just exemplified it in the conversation you're having with your children. And I mean, I think it comes down to values, right? Which is something that what are your family values? What do you stand for as a family? And, continuing to ingrain those in your children over and over and over again, just like we do about tying your shoelaces or taking a shower each day, or, whatever it is that we're trying to teach them. We have a long list of things that we sort of have to say to them a million times and hope that by the time they leave, they've figured that stuff out. And then you have to add on to that list, what are the other things that have to do with their character and who they're turning out to be. And so, yeah, I think it's part of the legacy of my family that I've then carried on to them. But also my husband, he is like a light, he is the warrior guy. And not in the sense of a fighter, but he is will stand up for anybody and will, people literally come running and knock on our door in the middle of the night because the neighbor across the street had a heart attack, or, someone got in a car accident, or my pipe broke. I don't know what I'm to do about it, And so it's really that good Samaritan quality of, we're in this together. This is a web. It's really I think because I was raised with more of a socialist perspective from my parents versus a capitalist perspective, that the rub for me always comes up around sort of capitalist principles, which are, rooted in individualism, and, it's a dog eat dog world, and, separate, we're separate from each other, right? And there's not enough for everybody. And I feel like that is really where both socialism, communism, sort of ideals and practices, Marxism, as well as spirituality has come into play for me, which is really, we have more than enough resources on this planet for every single person on the planet to be able to eat. We have more than enough for everybody to have a home and to, have a job and to have a good life and for our planet to be working. There is nothing broken. We are so resourceful, and whoever it is, whatever being it is, whatever, thing that created this magnificent planet that we get to live on has that all figured out for us. The fact that we're humans, we came into the mix and sort of jacked it all up. Mm-hmm. And so really the principle of, you can give of your own and not be afraid that there's not going to be enough for you, or the more you give, the more you get, right? Is something that I say to my kids, or, we're all connected. And so one man's suffering is your suffering. And I'm an extremely compassionate person. Like I, am a very sensitive person in a lot of ways, and a very emotional person, emotionally open person. I'm very good at reading energy, and character, but I also am I feel very deeply. Mm-hmm. And so I cry all the time, and I can't drive by people without connecting with their circumstances and animals, all that stuff. And so we talk about it a lot in our family, just about a lot of it is also conversations around gratitude and privilege. Every night, at dinner, we say a blessing and we talk about, all the things that we're thankful for, but also we pray for the other people on the planet that don't have what we have. And, the awareness of how many people are suffering on the planet, and how, just by a lot of luck in life, we ended up in this circumstance and we're so blessed. And of course we want that to continue, but we don't want it to be at the detriment of others. Yeah. And so, really having them understand that it's this web, this worldwide web, which is really why I created Women Empowering Women, was to create this worldwide web of women that could be called into effect. And it came out of this flooding and these tornadoes that were coming, and all these natural disasters that have just, seems like it's speeding up more and more all around the world, and just watching people and feeling so hopeless and helpless of I want to help them and I don't know what to do. And what can I do? I don't know how to get over there, and one person's going to be able to do what? I don't know. But I realized if I could get that million women worldwide web together going, right, then I would have women on the ground everywhere in the world. And if there was a crisis, and whether it was a small crisis, a sister doesn't have childcare or can't keep her lights on or whatever, or a big one, like a whole town was wiped out, here in with the fires.
Yeah.
And we need ladies on the ground that can go and bring blankets or, open up their doors, that we would have this web, this big circle of women all around the world that would be connected and really with a commitment towards service and giving back to each other in that foundation of community building and sisterhood. And that's where it came from. And then, because I want it to be for every woman on the planet, and I just don't want there to be a reason why people can't do it. I'm coming from the coaching industry and entrepreneurship space, again, with this sort of socialist versus capitalist perspective. I've had a lot of struggle about building a business and the models that are, to me, sort of oppressive and take advantage of people. And so trying to figure out how to do great work, get paid what I need to make a good living and what is aligned with the value of the work that I do. And yet, how can I really be, serving that higher calling of giving back and connecting that web? And so the download for me was, it's supposed to be $1 a month, $12 a year. And
Which
it's like
is
everybody
unheard of.
Yeah, exactly. And you've been in my circles for a long time. I have very high end things. I have plenty of things that people pay me a lot of money to do. And yet my heart has always been with the everyday woman. And because I live in South Central, I see the women waking up at 4 a.m. getting on the bus, and they can't barely afford a bus pass, So I'm like, if I were to talk to that lady, I would want to be able to tell her, I got somewhere for you to go, and she might not be able to do $12. And then I'd say, that's okay. We're going to scholarship you. So we're not turning away anybody, but we're also making it just like a hell yeah, no barrier to entry, right? Really trying to level that playing field. And so $12 a year, all my friends and my coaches and everybody are like, you're crazy. Like, you're not going to make any money doing that. I'm like, that's not the point. It's not about the money.
About making the web.
It's about making the web. Amen, sister.
So, okay, one last question. I could talk to you for...
I know, this is so good.
See, this is our first conversation, everybody listening. We just want to keep talking, but also asking you to listen for more than an hour is a little bit much, because a lot of you are like doing the dishes and listening to an hour. It actually takes like 4 tries because you get distracted and people need you. And
I just want to say, I'm about to start my own podcast, and I'm a big fan of the long form conversation interview. So I just want to say, I think we're doing great, but yes, we can wrap it up.
I don't want to wrap it up, but 2 things I want to ask you about. So one of the things that gets both of us really excited, and where we share a passion, and this is even this conversation was very interesting to me, because as I have a list of people that I would love to have on the podcast, and you were on that list, but I fell a little bit behind, and who am I to be doing this? And, gosh, I don't know how to be, how to make this a sustainable business. Everything that you've just been saying, right? Like making it accessible to everybody, but valuing my time and making sure that people are getting value, but not like over-promising and not losing myself and being over-giving and over-empathic and over-compassionate and compassionate and all that stuff. All of that has sort of been storming, and the results has been like, oh, I'm not quite as prepared. And when I started podcasting, I had like a month worth of podcasts lined up in advance, and everything, like they dropped at 8:00 on a Monday every week. And it's been a little rocky. And so people who have been sticking with me, I thank you for sticking with me, because through the summer where we were away and everything just all kind of, the wheels came off. And in through the fall when, adapting my daughter to a new school and all kinds of things were going on. A flu, now we're on flu 2 for the winter. Let's knock wood and hope, thank goodness and the universe that it's our last one. But all through all of this, looking at who I wanted to have on the podcast and when, and your coaches will be like, oh, be mindful of who you're having on and make sure that, there's room for everybody, but make sure you kind of protect your turf. And these voices were all coming up because you had offered on Friday to come and do the podcast, which I'm so grateful for. And the sort of capitalist patriarchal part, teaching was like, oh, well, you both are in the sisterhood space, and Celia's something where it's like $12 for a year.
Right. And why would someone want to join hers and mine when hers is 12?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, hers is $12 a year, and yours is 20. Well, initially
whatever.
Your early birds were 25, and now it's going to be 30 a month. And that's like $1 a day instead of $1 a month. And like all of this was going on. And yet I am so happy to have you on, to have you talk about women empowering women, because this is exactly what it's all about. It's not about me being like, yeah, you know what, I'll have you on, but not now, because it really doesn't work for me. And I know you're doing your thing. And yeah, no, not now, because I want to protect the people who are listening to me. And I call bullshit on that, because people who are going to connect to you are going to connect to you for reasons that they connect to you and feel called to you. Maybe it's your activism, or maybe it's some part of you, or the sound of your voice, or whatever it is. Maybe they're going to connect to me for whatever other reason, because I have a slightly different, like, we look at,
or they're going to do both. That's what I
or
think.
They're going to do
both. I'm like, hey, it's $12. Just put me as an add-on. Okay?
Right? Yeah, totally. I'll put you on the card.
A little upsell. Would you like to also be on Women Empowering Women?
That's right. Because and that's the whole thing, right? So one of the core experiences that I had as a child, and I've spoken about this before. If this is not your first time listening, you'll have heard me mention this before, because it made such an imprint on my life. I remember being in grade school, and I'm like releasing this memory slowly, but I remember being in grade school and walking into the girls' bathroom that was on, like, in the back of our school by the library. And I walked into the girls' bathroom, and there were a bunch of girls who were in my class, and they were all handing out birthday invitations. And I walked in, and I remember them looking over at me, freezing, and one of them going, I went, "What are you doing?" And they said, "This isn't for you. You don't get one." And that was like and that feeling of like shame and humiliation and exclusion really, really, really marked my experience of girls. Girls weren't safe. Girls were dangerous. Girls would talk about me. I was the tallest. I was the youngest. I got the best grades. I was a cute little thing. I loved teachers. Teachers loved me. That was the rest. My French didn't sound like everybody else's French, so I was different. Like, I mean, people have really rough childhoods, and that doesn't make a really rough childhood. But for little me, that was really hard. Like, it was really, really rough, and it was exclusion. And so I took on really early this message that groups of girls weren't safe. And the first time I was in a female environment that felt safe, I was 34. No, that's not true. I was 37. I was 37. And I was doing my yoga teacher training, and there were 13 of us in that group. And we met and practiced and studied every single day for a month, other than weekends. No, not even. We went in and practiced over the weekend. So it was a month solid. And I remember sitting in that circle the last day with my teacher, an amazing woman who teaches in LA. Joan Hyman is her name. She's extraordinary. And she gave us this talking. I have a piece of selenite here. It looks a little phallic, my selenite.
Yeah.
She gave us all a piece of selenite, or she gave us a piece of selenite, and whoever had the selenite got to talk. And I had this piece of selenite, and I remember saying, this is the first time I've ever felt safe in a circle of women. And I am astonished still to this day how many women have similar stories, and how many women have felt that it is more dangerous to be in the company of other women, and more dangerous to be vulnerable around other women than it is beneficial. And I think this ties back, without starting this whole conversation again, I think that this really ties back into the whole patriarchal model that benefits from us not being in sync and together. And it goes back to the era when people didn't know how to read, and the clergy didn't want anyone to know how to read, because if they could read, then they would have power. And if women could read, they would have power. And if they could vote, they would have power. And so it all stems from there. And I really just want to celebrate the fact that you are constantly pulling other women up without feeling or fearing, at least it doesn't look like it, that it diminishes you. And to me, that is the real definition of sisterhood, is of looking each other in the eye and saying, I see you, and you are beautiful, and you are worth me looking at you and breathing in your energy and hearing you, and I am here and I'm not going anywhere. Tell me, just tell me. And the modeling, certainly that you and Lindsay and Elena have done around the sisterhood that you have created, and insofar as I can see from outside, and haven't yet
It's real.
Haven't yet made it into the...
You're going to make it to the Sacred Spear retreat.
I so want to go.
I bet. Yeah.
And it has really been teaching me like that there is nothing to be afraid of. There is nothing there's nothing to fear. And 2 weeks ago, actually, at the time of recording, I published a podcast with Julie Neal, who is the host
of that today.
Yeah, the host of Mother's Quest, which is
awesome.
She is awesome. And she had Sabrina Fulton on, Trayvon Martin's mom, and she's doing a fundraiser for her to get the mothers to go to the Circle of Mothers who've lost a child to gun and racial violence. And same thing with her, right? Like having her on the podcast, old me would have been like, she has a podcast. I don't know if I should have her on, right? Yeah. That was the fear. That was the fearful message that was taught to me. Like sisterhood is dangerous. Competition is dangerous. Make sure that you're bigger, etc.
Not enough for both of us.
Right. And there is enough for all of us to be in this circle. And the more time, like I'm about to be 45 in a couple months at time of recording. And I'm constantly like delighted with the possibility of like, oh my God, we can actually help each other. Oh my God, we can support each other. And maybe people are listening and like, what are you on about? Of course you can. Like maybe if you've been on sports teams, but like
two different experiences. And I know we're wrapping it up, but I felt like there were a couple things I just had to say here, which are, first of all, I'm so excited that you are a member in Women Empowering Women.
We do.
Because now you will get to experience that warm hug of sisterhood. I know you're creating it in your circles as well. But one thing that I am known for is the diverse women that I bring together that a lot of women have never really experienced. Even let's say the white women we were talking about earlier who are like, I want to learn more and I want to open myself up, but I'm sort of in an all-white world, and that usually is also an indicator of like there's some work to be done if you have ended up in sort of an all-white world. Mm-hmm. And so part of coming into my circles is great for white women because it is so diverse and there are so many different people, and yet we are committed to this baseline core value of sisterhood, which means this is a positive, supportive space that we lift each other up. That is what we do. And so like my signature in-person event is called a Women's Night Out. And I started that in like 2011. And I've been doing it several times a year in person. It's only $20 to come to. It's a workshop, but it's really just a circle. It's a women's circle. And the sort of core tenets of it, which have carried over to Women Empowering Women, is every woman will be seen, heard, valued, honored, loved, and respected, right? And it's that thing of like, we just need to be seen. We need to be heard. We need to feel like people get us, right? And when you set that value system from the beginning, what I've experienced is women sort of come in, they don't know what they're coming to. And then as soon as they sort of catch the tone of what this really is, and then they feel my energy and they're like, no, this is for real. And they feel that connection, they take a deep exhale, and before you know it, they're connecting with people they have nothing in theory in common with, and yet they have so much in common. And so just to say the what I'm hearing you sort of talk about is what I feel is like the sister, mother, woman wound, right? Which is a real thing, right? It does run deep. However, the pieces that you're bringing up about the patriarchy and about the social structures at play is the perpetuation of that this is inherent to who we are as women. I call bullshit on that. Mm-hmm. Because, like I said, my mother, Leanne Hurst Mann, is a, world-renowned historian on feminism and, patriarchy. And the way that she taught me is that we came from, if you go way, way, way back to the beginning of civilization, that, women and men were equals, and that there wasn't these social structures that we have in place around relationships and mother and father and husband and wife that we have created now. And so in reality, where they say the men went out and foraged and did all this hunting and stuff, and the women sort of stayed back and kept the fire and kept the kids and stayed in circle together, we really were in circle together most of the time. And we were in charge of the community building, and we were in charge of raising the children together. And the really interesting thing about that is the men would come back, but when they came back, you could hook up basically with anybody you wanted to hook up with. You didn't have one guy that was your guy. Mm-hmm. And so you would get pregnant and you wouldn't necessarily know who the father was.
Mm.
And the babies would be born and all of the fathers would be uncles and but the mothers would know who their children were. Right. And so it was like the mother and the sisterhood of mothers raising the children, creating this community, this web, right, was the core of civilization. And then the men were doing their thing, but there wasn't a judgment on that, right? And so then it was only when patriarchy was introduced, and that was 200,000 years ago, civilization and us starting our societies in that way. It was only when, patriarchy and capitalism, all those things came into play about 2,000, 3,000 years ago, that they started to create women as property. And the reason for that is because they started to realize that wealth was created through inheritance. And the only way to inherit was to have an heir. And the only way to know that you had a rightful heir was to get married. And so to have it passed down through a lineage. And so therefore you had to marry, these laws came in place that the only way a child could be born was through wedlock, and that the wife was property. She had no rights to the property, right? And she had no rights to anything except she was here to birth these babies that then would pass on this lineage down the line. And so all of that to say, and we are just now finding our voice as women. We are just now finally finding our freedom as women. And we've had now 2,000 or 3,000 years of this perpetuated socialization as though we are not worth anything, and that we are separate from each other, and that we have to fight to survive kind of mentality, when what we're really trying to do is remember, right? Remember the truth of who we are, not just as sisters, but as I would say, sort of children of God, that we are worthy and complete and whole underneath all of it. And that what society has put on us, that is not inherent in who we are. That is not the nature of who we are. And that's not the truth of who we are. And so that's why the sisterhood circle is so important, because it's literally a rewiring of the DNA, of the memory, of the programming, to just reverse it back and to say, let's get back to the truth, right? So sorry to go a little bit deep on that, but don't
apologize. Don't apologize.
That's true. No apologies. But I wanted to say one last thing, which was, I was raised up around Black women, and they're my favorite people on the planet. And they are so loving. And the thing about the Black community that people don't understand, because the way that media and the white world creates the same kind of programming about Black people, is they make them scary and dangerous and different and other. And what my experience has been is the Black community is the most welcoming community I've ever met. And the Latino community, they welcome people in. They welcome in people that have nowhere to go and don't fit in anywhere. And my experience with them, I have been welcomed with open arms. And my Black sisters have loved me unconditionally and have lifted me up. And they have checked me. They have taught me about myself. But they have also just loved me so much. And so I just want to encourage people to keep going and keep meeting new people, because there's so many wonderful women out there that can be your sisters. And if you don't have them, come find us and join one or both or all of our communities. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, because they're complementary and different, and feed different aspects of the whole beings that we are. So last question, and I don't want to let you go without asking a question. And we will include, I won't get you to list them, but I'll put all of the ways that people can find you in the show notes. Yeah. We'll get all that from you after. So my last question that I ask everybody is, and you are my longest podcast interview, and I love it.
Yay!
My final question for you and for everyone always is, where do you get your mama fuel? And I always think I know the answer, and then it always surprises me. So where do you get your mama fuel? Where do you fuel yourself?
Can you just elaborate on what that means to you? So the mama fuel meaning?
Yes. So what I say about this podcast and why I called it Mama Fuel is, and I'm actually transferring my business name from the Centered Mama Project to Mama Fuel.
Oh, great.
Because I want to provide fuel for every single mama's heart, soul, mind, and body. Because if you don't fuel yourself, and as I have again rediscovered, not for the first time, but in a whole different level recently, if you don't fuel yourself on the body level, my iron levels were so low that my doctor didn't know how I was standing up. and it was affecting my mental health. So if you don't fuel yourself on the physical level, things start breaking down. If you don't fuel your heart, if you don't fuel your soul, if you don't fuel your mind, it all, like, the wheels come off. And when the wheels come off with mama, the wheels come off for everybody in the family, and the ripples,
Sure,
and they're wide. So how do you find your own fuel?
Well, let's see. My first instinct was I find it from within, right? And so I feel like I really love myself, and I'm not afraid to say that I think that I'm phenomenal. And it's been a mantra that I've had to really own in the last handful of years is I am phenomenal. I am magnificent. I have greatness within me. And so really to truly love myself and to not back down in my greatness, right? To just claim that whatever it's called, unabashedly, or without any shame, without any dimming of my light. Really, how can I allow myself to be my fullest light in the world and not let anybody make me feel like I can't be that way? And if they do, not apologize for pushing back against that, right? And then really, it's a lot about listening to your body, and we've mentioned Elaine Lipson a million times, and she's a divine self-care mentor, and she has an amazing circle of her own. And, and she's taught me so much. I mean, that, like I said, that is the work that I do in the world with my women also. And yet it's her specialization. And so she's been such a good reminder, she's always in the back of my mind, thinking about her in terms of really tapping into my body and listening, because your body is talking to you every second of the day. It's telling you exactly what it needs. And the problem is that and that's like your divine feminine energy, right? Your divine feminine part of your brain and your body that is like really intuitive and communicating with you. And unfortunately, as these modern day women and sort of this patriarchal structure that has been put in place with the capitalism pieces, we are so hyper on overdrive with masculine energy, right? And it's all about the to-do list and the overwhelm and the anxiety, and we put everybody else before ourselves, and we leave ourselves last on the list. And then we don't have a wake-up call until it's too late, right? Until something happens, we have chronic illness, or we have a heart attack or a stroke or something like that, or car accident. And so for me, I really try to listen to my body, and I try to give it what it needs. And so I'm in an extremely privileged place where I can a little bit set my own schedule. So if I wake up in the morning and I'm just not feeling it, like that might just be a Netflix day, where I'm in the bed, and I post that thing, what is it, like bra off, whatever day kind of day, I'm just chilling out. Or, at night I try to take baths and drink my glass of red wine and eat my dark chocolate. I really try to move every day. I'm an athlete at heart. I'm a basketball player as a child, and fitness and health is really important to me. So I really just want to be strong my whole life. And so walking is, my daily practice of getting, I try to get 15,000 steps a day while listening to your podcast or check NPR or whatever. And just giving myself what I need. And a lot of that, I just want to say, as you can tell, since I'm the reigning queen of the longest podcast ever for your show so far, is I'm a hyper-verbal person. I'm a communicator. I'm a Gemini. Words of affirmation is my love language. So I need to express myself. And if I don't get, whatever I'm feeling on the inside, I need to get out of me. And if I don't get it out, that's when I feel bad. But when I release it, is when it's gone, right? It's released. And so that's a big part of my practice too, is speaking my truth of where I'm at in any given minute of the day, and not being afraid of conflict. Because, and my parents modeled this for me, is, they're two super powerful people that are super intelligent, and neither of which were trying to dim their light or step down from their power. And so they would have a lot of struggle. And as children being raised in that household, we were like that too. We were really powerful and had a lot of opinions. And so there would be a lot of struggle. And yet we would do that respectfully, and we would debate or argue or whatever. We'd get all the way through it. And then it would be over, and we'd be back to whatever we were doing, watching a movie or whatever. And so I try to really practice that in my house also. My husband was raised where conflict was a bad thing. They got into physical altercations and stuff. So he's much more shy from having a good debate or argument, but I've tried to convert him. But for me, the main thing is for me to be, I don't care how he feels about it.
You got to get it out.
I got to get it out. So that's my thoughts. It's a good one.
Again, that's not what I would have expected. So I love asking that question and finding out the answer, because every single guest offers different suggestions and ideas through her explanation, as you have just now, of things that those of us who maybe struggle to get our mama fuel. And we all, let's face it, we all have days where we struggle to get our fuel because we forget about ourselves. We put ourselves further down the list because that's what we've been taught makes a good mother. And it's crap. It's not true. So it's good to have these weekly reminders of places that you can maybe look to fuel yourself, and then build your own collection of what really feels good and works for you. Celia, I adore you, and I could talk to you for so long. But I think I actually just heard it's 10:20 at night now, and I think heard a little voice going, Mom.
Yes, it's time.
So I'm going to say thank you, and I will include all of the links for people to join both the MamaFuel Sisterhood and the Women Empowering Women Circle for only $12, which is like, it's $1 a month. Come on.
Yes. Come on, girls.
Come on in. Join me. I'm in there too. And let's all learn and uplift each other together. Thank you so much for the work that you do, for the light that you shine in the world. I wish you Godspeed with your South LA cafe. It's just awesome. And if I ever get out to LA, I want to go and sit at the bar in your cafe and have a good old chinwag with whoever else is sitting there and learn all about your neighborhood, because it's the furthest thing from Geneva that I can possibly, well, maybe not the furthest thing I can imagine, but pretty close. One of the furthest things I can imagine. So thank you. I love you. And I look forward to maybe talking to you on the podcast again.
Yeah, I think we got to do a part 2 in like 6 months.
Totally.
Lots of love to all the ladies and possibly a few gentlemen listening in. I'm just so grateful that you hung in there with us. And I hope that this enriched you. That's my main goal in this, is that something that we've said today has helped you, or been an aha moment for you. And when I say please reach out, I truly mean that. I don't need you to join my community. I just need you to get the support that you need. So please don't be afraid to reach out to me for that.
I love it. And I will put all of your contact information in the show notes. Celia, thank you. And I will talk to you soon. Have a great afternoon. Bye.
Wow. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Celia Ward-Wallace as much as I did. I have certainly walked away with so much inspiration, a lot of books that I need to read, and education that I need to assimilate, and steps that I want to be taking in my life with my own experience, presence, and showing up, as well as the same with and for my girls. I hope that you drew solace, inspiration, encouragement, and felt all of the possibility that just radiates out of Celia. And if you're interested in joining her Women Empowering Women Circle, I will provide all of the links for that in the show notes, as well as the link to my email, which is Anne, ANNE, at MamaFuel, MAMA, fuel.me, because that is the only way that you can get in touch with me to join the MamaFuel Sisterhood right now. For only $30 a month, which is $1 a day, you can join an incredibly beautiful, intimate circle of international women who are supporting and celebrating each other and journeying through this life together. And I would love to have you join us. So if you feel called to step into the MamaFuel Sisterhood Circle, drop me a message and let's have a conversation. I'd love to tell you what goes on in there. Can't wait to hear from you. Until then, have a great week, beautiful. That's it for this episode of MamaFuel the podcast. Thanks for listening. There's a lot more conversation, sharing, and real mama talk happening in our private Facebook group. You can join that totally free by going to www.thecenteredmamaproject.com/Facebook, or just go to Facebook and type facebook.com/mamafuel.me, or just search mamafuel.me and you'll find us there. Make sure you say hi when you get in there. If you like this episode, or if you know a mama who could use a little bit of Mama Fuel, I would love for you to share this episode and to rate it and leave a review. That will help us get this episode into more mamas' ears, and for that, I will be eternally grateful. Every comment helps, and it is always such a delight to hear from you. Thanks, and bye for now.